You've heard the old wives' tale that you'll catch a flu if you stay out in the cold too long. Well, it turns out that may not be so much of an old wives' tale, at least not entirely. Dr. Forrest Arnold is with the University of Louisville Physicians, ULP. He also teaches classes about infectious diseases at the UofL Medical School, and he's here to talk about colds and flu. Great subjects there, Dr. Arnold.
That is my career.
That is your career, colds and flu, huh? Well, we're in March, and is this not the peak flu season?
It is. I think a lot of people think the peak flu season is the dead of winter at the turn of the year, but in Kentucky, it's towards the end of March, and even last year, it was the first week of April we peaked out with flu.
Why is that? Why isn't it in the middle of December and January when it's really cold outside? Why is it in March or perhaps April?
I think because we're a little farther south, so as the farther north you go, the peak is a little earlier. But we're just enough south that if for whatever reason it peaks at the end of March here.
Okay. And what percentage of people in Kentucky, do you have any idea how many people get vaccines and how many don't, or across the United States? Because I always get my flu vaccine, but there's a lot of people who don't.
Right. I did look that up right before I came, and it's 4 out of 11 people got the vaccine. So it's kind of a weird number.
So 36%.
Yeah,
See, about a third. So I'm math pretty good on that? See,
yeah,
that's
very good.
So only 36% of people get the flu vaccine.
Right, that are eligible for it. And all you need to do to be eligible is basically be over 6 months of age. So it's a lot of people that should be getting the vaccine.
But they're not. So as a doctor, how do you convince them to get it? Or are you trying to convince them to get the vaccine?
No, I convince them. If they're in my office and they're telling me they haven't had the flu shot, then I do try to convince them. I hear a lot of the same reasons that I'm allergic to eggs, which they've done away with that one. Or every time I get it, I get the flu. So the flu vaccine is dead, and what it's supposed to do is wake up your immune system. And so that inflammatory response kind of gives you some symptoms like you might have the flu, but it's certainly not the flu, and it goes away in a day. In fact, I tell my patients, if that happens, then that's a good thing. That means your immune system is working. That's what it's supposed to do. Mm-hmm. I've had it before, but I certainly don't have it every year.
Right. So you've had it before when you got a flu shot.
Right. I've had the symptoms, like, I'm got a little headache, I'm kind of weak or whatever, and then it goes away in a day, and I'm like, hey, I'm glad my immune system is working.
All right. Well, we're going to talk about this research here in a few minutes that shows that when you actually get the flu, more likely to get the flu, because I thought that was interesting. But let's stay on this topic for a second here. So you said the flu vaccine is dead. It's made out of eggs, right, or something? Or what? Describe the flu vaccine to me, and what do you mean when you say it's dead?
Oh, okay. They use virus in it that is influenza, and that flu virus is dead. Unless you get the nasal...
So it's not an active virus. They're not injecting you with an active virus when they give you the flu vaccine.
Unless you get the nasal mist, which the CDC said not to get this year.
Oh, really?
So the nasal mist is a live vaccine.
Okay.
But the shot that most everybody gets is a dead virus. That's right.
Okay. And then this year, I know last year in 2016, the flu vaccine was good for against like 60% of the people that got flu, right? Or the types of strains of flu.
This year, like 2016-17, it's about 50 to 60%. Last year, they didn't guess so well which strains, so it was more like 20%.
And when you said they didn't guess the strains, I've read this story. It is amazing because it's 2 or 3 years out that they have to figure out they have to guess what's going to be the strain of the flu that hits in 2000, like this year, in 2019 or 2018. They're trying to guess what the strain is.
Yeah, they try to guess what it's going to mutate to. And being in the northern hemisphere helps a little because it hits the southern hemisphere first, but it's still not enough time to make a gazillion number of flu vaccines. And so they get a little help being in the northern hemisphere. But you're right. They're trying to predict a couple years ahead of time what it's going to mutate to, and that's a very hard job.
So how do you convince your patients then, if it's only 60% effective or 50% effective against the flu? I got a 50-50 shot that I might wind up with the flu anyways. Why should I get the shot?
Right. And so, for those people that get the flu, it's 100%. So if it keeps you from getting the flu, we always remember that approximately 30,000 people die every year from the flu. Why should it be you? Certainly it's the people who already have comorbidities and the like, but if you have the flu, you're out of business for 3 days or so. And if I could have that time back, I certainly would want it back. Sometimes people, they'll be at work or maybe they're at a dinner party and they're like, I'm trying to enjoy myself, but I have the flu. That's not the flu. Yeah, it's a cold.
That's a cold, and you're
the
feeling
flu
like crap.
is like,
yeah.
I want to go to bed, no questions asked. That's where I'm going. My body's just like
Right.
down.
There's a difference, right? All right, we're talking with Dr. Forrest Arnold from ULP, University of Louisville Physicians, and he also teaches at the medical school. Well, let's talk about when you are most likely to get the flu. I think this study will startle some people, but go ahead and give us some details of the study that just came out.
Well, this study looked at to see if there was an association between temperature and getting the flu. And so they looked to see if every year, if the flu season epidemic starts with a cold snap, if you will. And they had about 20,000 people, so a lot of data. And what they noticed was that influenza was indeed associated with a lower temperature that hits an area. So they also looked at some other things. They looked at viruses, perhaps that a lot of listeners have not heard of, that cause the common cold, like Boca virus and metapneumovirus. But they also looked to see if it was associated with humidity, which it was not. And they looked to see if it was associated with something called vapor pressure, which is an indication of the how fast a liquid evaporates. So I can't tell you the difference, because it seems to me if it's humid outside, that liquid's not going to evaporate very fast, and if it's dry,
it's going to stay in the air. Yeah.
So they seem very equivalent to me. So I have to have another guest to explain the difference between vapor pressure and humidity.
We need somebody from the Speed School of Engineering or something,
Right.
or some weathercaster that can figure that one out.
I do understand temperature, though.
Yes.
And so what they're looking at is to see if the epidemic starts. So they didn't look to see if, I forgot my computer in the car, I'm going to run outside and get it. It's only 25 degrees. Am I going to get the flu if I go out there and get it? They didn't have 20,000 people that ran outside in the cold and came back, which is kind of what we would want to know, and what our old wives' tale tells us.
Right.
But they did see that when that snap started, that's when the influenza season hit. I think one thing to remember is that we have influenza cases all year long. There's just a major peak in the winter.
Right.
And so that's another thing to keep in mind.
Well, the thing that I found interesting about the study when I was reading it, I thought this was an old wives' tale, that, just because the temperature drops and it's cold outside has absolutely nothing to do with the flu. It's just a transmission between me and you. I sneeze on you, you get the flu, just like I have it. That it had, nothing to do with the temperature. But when it's cold outside, the air is dry. This study concluded that it's more likely that those particles from my sneeze will stay in the air longer and hit and perhaps infect more people, right? Isn't that the deal?
Exactly. Because influenza is not like tuberculosis where your TB will float down the hallway. It'll just be in the air, and on these droplets it falls. And so if you're close enough to somebody, maybe 3 feet, you'll catch it. But if the air's drier, maybe 6 feet is all the closer you need to be to catch the influenza. If we could see influenza, you would see that people leave a wake behind them with all these droplets. It's falling on everything around them, and then they're coating doorknobs and who knows what else. When it's cold outside, I think of, everybody gets together inside, and then you've got more transmission that way of the people that actually have it.
So other than washing your hands repeatedly, which everybody talks about, what are ways that you can avoid getting the vaccination, obviously? What are some ways you can avoid getting the flu, other than those two obvious things?
Right. Well, some people avoid crowds. I know that if they're afraid of getting the influenza, that they just stay away from crowds. But if you are in a crowd, you could consciously not touch your face, because it's your hands that get contaminated a lot of times, touching stuff. And so if you could just consciously not put your fingers in your mouth, your eyes, kids are terrible at this, and adults, we do it occasionally, and then sometimes that's all it takes.
Okay. Or wash your hands before you eat lunch. Sometimes I don't do that when I go to eat my lunch, and I may be shaking hands with God knows how many people during the day,
or scratch your eyeball or whatever.
Yeah,
that's
right. I got you. All right. Well, let's talk about colds now. Again, we're talking with Dr. Forrest Arnold from UofL Physicians, ULP. Colds. What causes a cold? Just tell me the simplest biological explanation of what causes a cold.
Okay. That is a virus, and it takes residence usually in your nasopharynx and does its thing, which is to infect that area, and it stimulates your immune system and just multiplies.
Okay. And do those little pills, those lozenges, the vitamin C, if I pound my body with vitamin C when I think I might be getting a cold, does that really work, or is that an old wives' tale too?
Well, they've done studies, and the vitamin C doesn't hold up.
So don't bother with it.
Yeah, the vitamin C is not a great thing to get rid of a cold. I think everybody should realize it's not a bacteria. So there's a lot of really just symptomatic things that we do to help, but not a whole lot of therapeutic things.
All right. So
once
if I
you got it.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. Is there anything you can do once you get a cold? Because I just don't know really anything other than keep blowing your nose and taking cold medicine to keep the runny nose from getting really bad.
Right. There's sometimes the postnasal drip turns into a sinusitis, so if you help take medicines to prevent that, you'll prevent another infection on top of it. But to actually get rid of the influenza, not really. Maybe salt water, gargling with salt water, is actually therapeutic against it. That'd probably be the closest thing.
Well, you've probably seen a lot of this, and I just have some anecdotal evidence of this, that it seems like a lot of people who got colds or coughs this year wound up with some sort of respiratory problem that they had for 3-4 weeks. I heard people in my office just coughing, or seems incessantly, for a month. Is that a common occurrence, or is that something that is a cold morphing into something else like bronchitis?
No, it's a cold. Cold means that you have one of these viruses, and there's just hundreds and hundreds of different ones. So perhaps those people that got the cough really got metapneumovirus or adenovirus, and it worked its way down, whereas other viruses like rhinovirus really just kind of stay up in your head. So it kind of depends on which kind. Those are not tests that doctors can do and just order the test. They're really just research to find out which virus exactly that you have. So it's nothing that you'll ever know, and it's kind of a frustrating thing.
All right. So as a doctor, what tips would you give to our listeners here in March as they walk around in the middle of flu season? What would you tell them? What are the 3 main tips you'd give them right now for flu and cold season?
It is not too late for the flu vaccine. As much as the drugstores want to sell you one in August, you probably should wait more to October, November to get your flu shot. But right now is not too late. Certainly wash your hands, go into the crowds, and don't pick your nose. Okay.
Well, good advice. I won't pick my nose today. How about that? It'll be the first day in a long time I haven't picked my nose, but just kidding. All right, Doctor. I appreciate you coming on the show, Dr. Arnold. Thanks so much. And now I've learned something. You see, I've learned a lot about colds and flu. How to handle it. All right, very good.